Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim Shells. Today is episode 253, and we're going to be interviewing Kathy. How you doing, Kathy?
I'm doing well. How are you this morning, Jim?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to do this like I was telling you before. So have you ever done a podcast before?
No, this is my first one.
First one? All right. It's pretty easy. It's kind of like a speaker meeting, except I'm going to ask some questions along the way.
Sure.
So first thing is let's start off with your childhood. Tell me about growing up.
Okay. Growing up, I grew up in Alabama. I was born in Chicago. When I was 5, we moved down south. My dad wanted to play football for the great Bear Bryant at Alabama. And so we moved down there in 75. I grew up in a home. My father was a police officer. My mom owned a community grocery store. My father was very strict and very physically abusive. I grew up loving music, playing in our family band. Um, just kind of the typical, well, not typical, but regular childhood, so to speak, growing up. But the big difference was my parents had the community grocery store, so I was thought of as the cool kid.
The what kid?
The cool kid.
Oh, the cool kid.
She's got all the candy and the sodas and
Oh,
chips.
yeah. I didn't think about that. So how was life in school and stuff?
It was pretty good. I did really good through elementary school. I had some difficult time adjusting in middle school and didn't do too well throughout up until 10th grade. But my senior year, things turned around. I became pregnant with my firstborn, my son, and I figured out real quick, real early, you got to be responsible, and I got a life now I've got to take care of. So at 17, that was pretty scary. I did have the wonderful support of my family. And I was very blessed in that regards. But for school, for me, I was always overweight, even though I was the cool kid because mom and dad had the grocery store. I was not popular at all. As a matter of fact, I was made fun of quite a bit because I was always so overweight.
Yeah, I dealt with that too as a child.
Yeah. And so, well, then that sets you up right there for depression and, things that go far, far beyond where we want to go sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said your dad was abusive. How did that affect you when you were growing up?
It's funny because growing up, I was always told, you're on drugs, you're this, you're that. And the God's honest truth, until I was 32 years old, I couldn't tell you what drugs looked like
Why
because
did
that
they think you were on why did they think you were on drugs or alcohol?
my dad just I always was accused of it. It didn't matter what I did. The drug tests to prove I wasn't. It didn't matter. It was always the accusation. To this day, I wish he were still alive because that's one question I really would love to address with him is why did you do that for so many years? Why? I don't understand. You were physically abusive. And in statistics today, a person who is physically abused as a child is 26 times more likely to become an alcoholic or use drugs. And I thought, I think to myself now, well, damn, I was right for it. As far as the environment that I was in and how I was treated and the abuse that, entailed. But I never did. I just never did. And it was very challenging to not be believed.
Yeah, I had an abusive father too, and I got bullied at school. So it's kind of like you have no refuge, it felt like.
Right. He's supposed to be the guy that I can run to when I need help or I'm upset or somebody's hurting me, not to be the one who's hurting me.
Yeah.
So that was very rough. Before he passed, we were able to make amends, and for that I'm very grateful. But it's ironic in that it is a direct result of his death that ultimately led me to drugs and alcohol.
Tell us more about that.
Well, when I was 28, mom and dad were only 48. My mother was killed. And 2 months later, I found my dad after he committed suicide. It took me about 3 years before I finally just had a nervous breakdown and lost all control of my life as I knew it then. I am the oldest of three girls, and my two sisters are substantially younger than I am. So when mom and dad died, they immediately looked to me to be there for them. And to the best of my ability and to the best that I could, I was. But at 28, I'm the oldest. I've got my two of my own kids. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm half my mom, I'm half my dad. They're both gone. Who am I? Who am I now? Because I always identified as David and Brenda's daughter, never as Kathy. It was always, David or Brenda. And so having an identity of my own wasn't something that I got until I was much, much later in life. But anyway, like I said, mom was killed and I found dad after he committed suicide. Not knowing what PTSD was, I started suffering from some of the symptoms of that. And I had met a gentleman in my life at that time who, when we first met, I did not know that he had been a drug user or a dealer for that matter. And I did know he had just gotten out of jail and things were great. And about 3 months into the relationship, he had my truck one day and I called that.
I'm sorry, say that one more time. He did what one day?
He had my vehicle, my truck.
Oh, he had your truck.
We had swapped vehicles for the day. And and I was off of work that day. So he was supposed to come and pick me up. And we were going to go do whatever. My truck is gone. He's gone. Didn't know what to do. Never dealt with anybody that had done drugs before to understand what they're on a crack run means. Well, that day he was on a crack run. That night, I finally found him, found my truck, and I was still so hanging on by a thread at that point that except for this one thing, he seemed to be the man of my dreams. He said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. You don't even have to work. You can come stay home, XYZ. And I believed him. Now, knowing what I know by someone who is abusive, I was being groomed. So let's fast forward a few years, and the drugs kept coming home. Well, when they're there in your face, eventually you're going to try. And I did. And crack was the first thing that I tried.
That was the first drug you ever took was crack?
Yes.
That's a heavy hitter for the first time.
Yep. I had smoked a joint one time. I was like 23 or 24. Other than that, as far as drugs, I didn't even know what they would look like. I had no clue. Well, then it went from crack to opiates. And I had a love affair with some opiates, let me tell you. They are the devil to me because that is where I found I would get in more trouble because I didn't understand what it meant to be sick if you didn't have it. And it just things snowballed and anyway, it led to a 12-year affair with drugs and alcohol, at which time I had stopped working. I was at home, but Bob had turned very, very violent. So here I am thinking, this just must be what men do. My experience in my life has been that men abuse. I know that's not the truth. I know that's not the case in all men, but in my case, so when you got the same thing after the same thing, you kind of start to think, is there something wrong with me? That, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one that is causing all of this. Well, if I hadn't said something, or if I hadn't stood up for myself or defended myself, I wouldn't have a black eye. And so I just took, and each day rolled into the next. And each day the despair became more and more and more until October 18th of 2014, my low moment, if you will, my rock bottom. I said to God, look, either make me or take me. And at that point, Jim, I didn't care which. I was prepared to go. I was prepared to leave this world, despite I'd be leaving 3 beautiful children behind. It was that miserable and that horrible and that addicted life that I just didn't care anymore. And here it is, Mother's Day. And let me tell you, God made me. He listened to what I said. He didn't take me, He made me. Because today my life is the best that it has ever been in the 53 years I've been on this earth. And
So
that
what
comes from,
happened at that moment? Like when you said he made you, like what was this like starting off slow? What was like the progression? How did you get better? Like what was the first thing that happened?
well, initially, I went and checked myself into a detox. And at that point, I knew when I left, I would be homeless. Because once I left there, that was it. So it was a series of, I went into detox, then I didn't have anywhere to go, and then I didn't know about shelters. I didn't know about any of the things that are available to us. So I went and I did something that I swore I'd never do. I checked myself into a psych hospital. And at first they said, well, why are you here? I said, well, I had been drinking. Well, we can't keep you here just for that. You have to be suicidal or have mental illness, and again, I still didn't know what to do or what to say to get help. And I found myself at kind of a weird spot because I didn't want to commit suicide. I could not commit suicide. I could not put my kids through my dad put me through. I couldn't do it. But as a chicken, I prayed for him just to take me or make me. So again, I started off in and out, drug rehabs,
What did
detox
they
centers.
but at the mental hospital, what did they admit you for?
Ultimately, they admitted me for suicidal ideations.
Okay.
Um, Even though I expressed that to them, that look, I can't put my kids through that, but yet I don't want to live. And under those the guy was really super sweet. He's like, look, we'll pull you in. So I figured out how to find a place to stay and have 3 squares a day and not be out in the cold. So that lasted for about 6 months. And then I went into my first 90, my only 90-day program. And it was there that I didn't know it now until now, but that's where he was going to start in making me. Because at the time when I was there, we were doing arts and crafts, and I started making little beaded jewelry and started selling them. So, because I had no income, I didn't work, and I smoked,
Wait,
needed money for cigarettes.
you were selling them from the mental hospital?
I was selling them. The girls that were in there with us, that were in there with me, would buy them. It was. This is not at the mental hospital. From the mental hospital, I went on to a program.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
I would just to take a step back real quick. I wanted to step back. How was it at the mental institution? Like what was like a day like in that?
Where I was at, um, you get up in the morning, you eat breakfast. There's usually a group in the morning. You meet with the someone that works there, and you guys all, if you want to participate, you talk. If not, kind of like a meeting in a
Okay.
way. And then they would have different activities throughout the day. They would have musical therapy. They would have art therapy. They would have the times where the doctors would come around and talk to you and whatnot. And it was very laid back. It wasn't, it was for what I did that time, where I was in my life at that moment, it was of great comfort to me. So then you would eat lunch and then go to other groups, or some people would just sleep all day. So that's kind of how that was there. The When I left there, I went to a temporary shelter for women for 2 weeks. They didn't have any beds at the regular shelter, so I ended up back at the hospital again. Um, and at this point, I was on my like third or fourth trip there, so it was becoming like a revolving door. Um, and sorry, I live by a train station. Um, uh, okay, but anyway, so it was it was a wonderful place for me to have started my road to recovery because I met some wonderful professionals who were like, all right, here, Kath, here's how you do this. Let's call this person to get whatever, whether it was housing or clothing or money or whatever the case might have been. Um, so yeah, I went from the from the inpatient mental hospital to the temporary shelter. Then from there is when I got into my first 30-day program, the first of two that I went to. And those were just very busy. I mean, from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, they've got your day planned out to the T with meetings, with groups, with classes, with everything that you could possibly need to put in your toolbox for sobriety. And then after that is when I went to this 90-day program with the APT Foundation. And that is where like I said, we were doing cards and crafts, and I started making beaded bracelets. And one of the girls like, oh, how much do you want for that? And I was like, I don't know, $2, $3. Just throw me a couple bucks. I don't care. One went into another, went into another, went into another, and it just picked up. So it was like, all right, cool. There's my smoke money. I got what I need. We got this made. Doing good in the program. For the first time in my life, I was finally receptive to hear what the message was they were saying. And before that, I was never receptive. I always thought all I need to go home is Bob, and he's got everything taken care of, and he'll take care of me. Yeah, no, not the case. So went through that. Then I finally was able to get into a shelter full time, and I was on a program where I would. It was me and another girl were in a special program where we would accelerate to a different house before others would because of the type of program we were at. So this was in order to help us find housing, to transition into housing. Well, at this time, I was still so early in recovery. I had left my ex, who I had just found out he had been with another woman the same night I had left. So here, my stupid mind is, I want to go back to this guy who's abusing me. Are you kidding me? But that was the mentality, the abusive mentality that I had at the time. Well, the best thing I can say he did was say no to me, because today he's in my life, but as a co-parent to our beautiful daughter. And in a wonderful way, we have become friends. But abusers know what they're doing. And he had me groomed to the T. I mean, it's if you go and you do and you research domestic violence and what people who abuse do, it was like I was reading my life story in front of me.
All right, all set.
All right. Um, so yeah, I ended up at this shelter and I still was thought I wanted to be back with Bob, or that's what my mind was telling me. But yet I knew in my heart that I didn't. And I didn't know what to do. So I went to my doctor and all I could do was cry. I mean, I ended up being admitted into the hospital for 36 hours straight. I cried. I couldn't stop crying. And so they put me on uh it's a benzo, I can't remember it. Clonopin, Clonopin,
Klonopin?
Clonopin. They put me on Clonopin. And I had the bottle. I had 30 of them. Now that was something I had never taken before. I knew of benzos, and part of the reason that was one of the reasons I'd never taken them. I didn't want another thing added to my list of things to be hooked on.
Yeah.
So when they did, I was at the shelter, and you have to turn your medication in when you're at the shelter, and then they dispense it to you. Well, with this particular shelter that I was at, um, you had to come back in for to get your meds throughout the day, but there were only certain times you could come in. Anyway, long story short, I did not turn them in immediately, and I was caught with them. They made me make a choice: either keep your housing and go to detox for benzos, despite the fact that I had taken 4 in a month. They had the full bottle. 4 out of a month had been taken out. They could see I had not been abusing them. But you're dealing with addicts. Addicts lie. I get it. Or now I do. I was put in an impossible position of go to detox or you're going to lose your housing. So I go to detox, but I get to detox and I'm telling them, look, I don't take these things. I took them 4 times. Within 16 hours, I was rushed to the hospital with heart failure and lung failure because they had given me detox medications for something I wasn't detoxing from. It almost killed me. So I ended up in a long-term facility, a nursing home, if you will, for 17 months. There, they had a phenomenal recovery program called iRecovery that I was a part of, and eventually I became the president of for the student body. I mean, not student, resident body. So I led groups. I would meet with other newcomers that were being admitted and talking to them and getting them to come to groups and planning activities. And so that really put me and set me up in an area where I was surrounded by the most incredible people, professionals, other residents, that when I got to that place, I thrived. I thrived and I looked at myself in the mirror, and at that time I was 317 pounds. Now I'm only 5'2". I'm a short little thing. And 300 pounds on 5'2" is not an attractive look. Trust me. Now I literally weigh 1/2 of what I used to. I
Good.
have lost over 100 pounds.
That's
I
great.
have gone from thinking that it's okay to be in a relationship where you're not treated good, then it's not a relationship I want to be in. I was always one that I felt like I had to have a partner. I never thought I could be okay just being in my own skin, just being Kathy. And there's nothing better when you can finally reach that point where you can look in the mirror at yourself and say, you know what? I screwed up royally. I've hurt my kids. You wouldn't know it this morning being Mother's Day because the first thing I hear, all three of my kids before I'm even out of my bed, all three of them, happy Mother's Day, Mom, we love you. Those kids had every right to walk away from me and say, Mom, I hate you. They had every right to do that. And they didn't. They didn't. And I have them in my life now in the healthiest of ways. My son, who is an alcoholic, I finally last year, he went into detox and rehab back in October. He's doing really good.
That's great.
Um, my oldest daughter struggles with addiction. I'm working with her. It's one of those things, Jim, unless or until you're ready, nothing anybody can say or do is going to make any difference.
No.
That person has got to be ready. So I just keep praying for the day when she's ready. But let's fast forward now a little bit from being in a nursing home to 6 years ago. Because 6 years ago is when I moved out of the nursing home and into my apartment that I am in now. I've been here, actually, next month will be 6 years. And when I first got here, it was just me. My youngest daughter was going to be coming home. I just didn't know when yet. I moved in the apartment the end of August. By the middle of October, my baby girl was coming home. By December, she had moved home for good. Um, and then things were just really, really great. I finally was approved for my Social Security disability, which I had fought for 3 years for. Things finally seemed to be coming together in my life. And then COVID hits. And we're all thinking, oh, great, now what? We're stuck at home. Thank God for me, I was not still drinking or using at the time because I don't know how I would have handled it otherwise. But anyway, so let's fast forward a couple years to 2018 because I moved in here 2018 of August. I started post university. I'm now in my senior year working toward my degree in drug and alcohol counseling. So that's consumed the last 4 years of my life, 5 years almost. But I am also a nationally CCAR certified recovery coach now. I received my certification back in March.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it even gets better because during COVID season, we were going to have some financial changes that were going to be coming up in our household, and I'm like, how am I going to replace that child support? Because my daughter was soon to be 18, well, she's 19 now, but this was a few years ago. So I'm like, how am I going to make up for that? We got to have the income. So with one of the stimulus checks that had come out, I said, I am going to buy just a little kit. It cost me $20, a little kit, and I'm going to make some bracelets again. So this is where I'm circling back to my jewelry making and how I didn't know I was going to get set up for a jewelry making career. Today, I have a jewelry business. I make memorial jewelry for people, and I make personalized rosaries, and we do recover rosaries for people. I have my own website. I sell on Amazon, eBay, Etsy, Facebook, Square. And my platform is everywhere. 8.5 years ago, I'm homeless. I'm riding a bus all day long to stay warm because it was in the middle of winter. And here I am today, almost a counselor, actually a certified recovery coach with a couple clients that I work with. And I have a beautiful jewelry business, my kids in my life, my grandkids in my life, the loves of my life, all 7 of them. My life could not be better.
There's a lot of good things that come with sobriety.
Yeah, and hard work. A lot
Yeah,
of hard
lots
work.
of hard work.
And a
Yeah,
lot of
we have 4 pillars in Addicts Anonymous, part of our program, and one of the pillars is hard work.
prayer. Hmm. And
Absolutely.
that's the one thing that, somebody said, well, how do you do it? How do I do it? There are some mornings I wake up, Jim, I don't want to get out of bed. Now, here's another little caveat for you. I suffer from medication resistant depression, as well as bipolar and ADHD. And I don't know if you've experienced depression. If you have, my sympathies, because then you know what a tough
I'm
road.
bipolar
So you get
and
it.
I have ADHD.
So you get it. We
Yeah.
have tried medication for this depression for, I can't tell you, going on a decade now. And there are some treatments, alternative treatments that I'm working with my psych and looking into, but that's down the road. But I had to learn that just because my brain said one thing didn't make it fact. I could wake up. There are mornings, Jim, I wake up with this depression, and it's like I don't even want to get out of bed. Why bother? I don't care. This is not for me. But yet, I sit there and say, "But Kathy, what the hell are you thinking about, girl? Look where you're at now. What do you mean you don't feel like getting out of bed? Get your ass up and let's do this." The brain is a liar. It can be a liar. The hippocampus, where especially with bipolar, and the hippocampus in the brain, it we are wired so differently. As an addict, as someone with mental illness, our brains are wired so differently. And for me, there are some mornings I literally have to have an argument with myself to get the hell out of bed. But I do it. And it's hard work. But you just got to show up and do it. And everything else does fall into place.
Yes, it does. As long as you put in the hard work, you got some discipline. Absolutely.
And for me, I know when I work with my fellow addicts with my coaching career, I tell them the way I address or come at sobriety is through the lens of faith. Because were it not for my God, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. That's why my favorite part of this story is make me or take me. And by George, he made me.
And here you are today telling your story.
Anyone listening, listen, I know it seems hard. I know it seems like such a big deal. And even as we hear in the rooms, none of us, we exclaim, what a tall order. How can I do that? But you can. But you gotta reach out to others. You can't alienate yourself. Alienating yourself is not going to do anything. For me, I had to work, and I had to work with my counselor. I had to work with a recovery coach. I worked with my psych. I worked with my primary care doctor. And it's like I was explaining to a young lady, you think about it, you bake a cake, you need milk, egg, flour, all that kind of good stuff, right? Well, in recovery, We need a little bit of this, a little bit of that to make our own cake or to make us into what we want to be. And whether it's meetings, whether it's a sponsor, whether it's a coach, whether it's your counselor, it doesn't matter. Reach out to these people because they can and will help. And you can and will achieve sobriety or cleanness, whichever you're trying to achieve for.
It's amazing. We got quite the story.
Thank you.
So again, towards the end here, is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Anything else you think we might have not touched upon or anything?
The biggest thing I guess I can say for me is I kind of have a soft heart for those who have ever suffered at the hands of an abuser, whether it was a parent, whether it was a spouse, a brother, sister, whatever, it doesn't matter. Guys, you deserve better. Don't let somebody treat you less than what you deserve to be treated. You deserve to be treated with the respect, dignity, and love. And don't take anything less.
There you go. That's some good advice.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I was just about to say thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. It does mean a lot to me.
I really do appreciate it. So I look forward to watching the rest of your shows.
All right, definitely. Yeah, I'll make sure after this I'll send you the link. Do
Please
me a
do.
favor, sit tight. I'm going to do the little sales pitch for the group here.
Okay.
All right, so everyone watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on all social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, you name it, we're most likely on it. Also, check out our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There's plenty of free resources as well as free literature there. And Addicts Anonymous has a book coming out called Addicts Anonymous, Our Stories. I'll keep you posted as far as the release date on that. So I thank everyone for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you next time.